He had his gun, so he just swung it open.
I start to notice that, the atmosphere feels a little bit weird.
First thing he seen was this 6.5 foot tall, broad shoulder, dark hair. That freaked him out.
We hadn't talked to her about like life and death and what any of that means. She's 3 years old,
So we turned around. Suddenly there's a whole tree falling across the road.
And she was describing to us that, there was a deceased person that she could see visually.
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, where we tackle the ever-expanding history and mystery of monsters and supernatural madness every Monday. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca for more information, or even check out exclusive content and support us at patreon.com/CryptidClues.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and today we've got a special episode. Maybe a little detour from what I had planned initially, but that's the joy of being your own content creator. You create your own content. And in the spirit of that today, my wife has been deep diving into Egyptian documentaries lately and gave me a request to explore beyond what the documentaries necessarily disclose about King Tut, and just to kind of add in a little bit more context to what they talk about and the possible extraterrestrial notions surrounding him. Now, full disclosure, I'm not claiming fact-wise that King Tut is an alien in this episode. But like old Cryptid Clues fashion, I will be exploring how there are some interesting things that are very mysteriously affiliated with King Tut in an effort to let you form your own unique perspective surrounding him. So let's start with common ground. Who is King Tut? We're going to have a little bit of a history lesson here. So Tutankhamun, or King Tut for short, was a pharaoh of the ancient 18th Egyptian dynasty, born in 1341 BC. And both his reign and life did not last very long, as he passed away at the age of 19, and he only ruled for roughly 9 years only. He ascended to the throne when he was about 8 or 9 years old, and evidence shows that King Tut's diplomatic relations were very, very strong with other kingdoms. And this is fantastic, and it's very interesting for being such a young leader. Then the country previously had faced such weak economic turmoil until he kind of filled in the void and just brought things back too. And this is confirmed by the abundance of gifts left in his tomb from other kingdoms. His military reign was also very powerful, and there is discussion whether or not King Tut was actually involved in battles himself or not. His tomb did contain many pieces of combat equipment, and there are graphic depictions showing him fighting, but it's tricky to know if this is either self-glorification, because many researchers actually hypothesize that he had physical disabilities that were basically yielding him incapable of fighting in combat. Now, this time period itself, however, we saw great signs of growth and sophistication and advanced literacy and technology. Things were booming. Copper alloy, known as bronze, was the basis of weaponry and tools. Iron was scarcely known in Egypt and elsewhere other than from meteorites, which I want you to remember that as we will be circling back to it. Iron itself was not more widely available in Egypt until about 500 BC and did not become an everyday metal until the Roman periods. This 18th dynasty that King Tut was born into lasted for around 255 years, approximately 1550 BC to 1295 BC. Egyptian culture reached its peak at this time. Evolution of skills and crafts to exceptionally high standards. Egypt was capable of supporting major armies, working silvers and golds into fabulous artwork, and of course, constructing incredible monumental statues and gigantic temples. Literacy, of course, played a large hand in this, consisting mainly of the elite classes. This included priests, scribes, and artisans, all which helped develop Egypt's bureaucracy that governed the country and managed its projects. Now, you wouldn't see Egypt begin to collapse until around 1100 BC. This is obviously with assassinations, economic droughts, increasing invasions, and just supply shortages, resources running dry. And again, that's for another episode in time that we'll get into. But looking back at what King Tut was up to, he both continued and axed several things that his predecessor, his father, had going for Egypt. And I'll speak a little bit more about his father later on, but one notable thing was the ending of the worship to the god Aten and the restoration of the god Amun to power. Now, Aten is depicted in many graphic depictions as being a disk, and disk at this time being anything flat and circular. So you look at the sun, flat and circular. This was also an aspect of Ra. Inscriptions and depictions show Aten worshipped as the creator, giver of life, and nurturing the spirit of the world. If you aren't familiar with the sun god Ra, envision a human body with the head of a falcon. But of course, Tut becomes king, or pharaoh, mind you, and the god Amun rises to supremacy. Amun was the god of the air, and with the belief that Amun created himself and then everything else in the universe, he then distanced himself from it all and remained invisible as the creator. Eventually, Ra and Amun merged, becoming a visible and invisible deity. Depictions of this form vary from being a goose, a snake, ram, body of a man with the head of a ram, frog, royal cobra, crocodile, or ape. I like the idea of this being able to transfer between being visible and invisible. It really, really reminds me of just the possibilities of traversing between dimensions, the quantum realm, as it were, like Sasquatch, if you know the that theory that is involved with that Sasquatch. But again, that is a very, very much a different topic. But the similarities are there in just the way that it's described. So I find that fascinating. I digress, however. With all that now out in the open, we're just going to touch base again on the Bronze Age and the introduction of iron into Egyptian culture, notably through meteorites. Now, hieroglyphics in ancient 4,000-year-old pyramids actually suggest that ancient Egyptians understood the extraterrestrial origin of these iron-rich meteorites thousands of years before Europeans would. Like many things, however, this belief died with this ancient world until it was re-hypothesized in the late 18th century. Seemingly rediscovered, of course. It wasn't popularly discussed either, but rather a timid concept that was proposed. Now, we mentioned Bronze Age. The Iron Age itself began roughly 3,000 years ago when the Hittites invented a method for extracting iron from ores such as hematite. This was a very defining process as it required creating and controlling temperatures above 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, you have to get that high temperature so that you can actually extract that iron and get rid of all the other garbage that's in there, basically. So you get that pure, nice smelted iron component. So granted, iron ores themselves were common in Egyptian deserts. They were all over the place. But the practice of smelting it, refining it, it wasn't achieved until later in Egyptian culture, as we talked about earlier, like 500 BC. And this, as we know, doesn't dismiss iron from Egyptian culture. And this is where things get kind of interesting. Somehow we can see iron objects appearing throughout Egypt, some hitting over 5,000 years ago in the old form of jewelry and, more recently, a dagger blade in King Tut's tomb. So before iron smelting was a thing, refining it, we have metallic iron forms that were acquired within possibly the core of small asteroids that would hit the Earth's surface. Having survived the atmospheric burn-up compared to smelted iron, we have meteor iron that has a larger abundance of minerals and a heightened level of other elements like nickel and cobalt. I find it slightly humorous that objects traveling far beyond eons through unending forces of space land on our planet and contain the same minerals as our planet does. It just blows my mind. But I guess this Earth is that of this universe. So why shouldn't there be more elements existing out there of this Earth? In a weird way, it does make total sense. It gives me hope that maybe one day we can harvest resources on other planets for our planetary expansion as a galactic civilization someday, but I digress. That's a whole other can of worms. Moving on, similar to those hieroglyphics that we mentioned prior, many of them present the sky as an iron bowl containing water, where pieces of which can fall to the earth as meteorites. This reminds me of that interview we had with Laurie Frary and the Supernatural Construct, and just the description of what the earth is. Just very, very similar to notions I noticed. Now, back to the examination of pre-Iron Age iron. This is where much debate stems from, because meteorites hitting Earth remains a rare occurrence, let alone to even witness. What are the real odds of one landing, being spotted by someone, and then being harvested? Note as well, how does an ancient culture discern iron inside a meteorite without physical or chemical analysis? It's a logical perspective for sure, so extraterrestrial meteorites are dismissed in favor of an alternative theory: volcanoes or lightning strikes. And I'm going to break stride here for a moment and add my 2 cents to this, albeit unqualified and far from a professional position. Let's say we're in the 18th Egyptian dynasty here. No satellites, no cities lit up like Christmas trees, just the absolute night sky filled with stars. I myself have gone stargazing to see meteor showers and other planetary phenomena. I cannot stress it enough that being in a city, you can't see a heckin' thing. So we drive out to remote areas up in high, pitch black spots and get amazing views that detail incredible depth what is in the sky above our heads. This would be ancient Egypt at the time as well. Not to mention, you have a civilization that is heavily worshipping gods above us, in a very different form than the gods of today. So people have an inclination to be focused to the skies. In today's world, I find myself many a time having not looked up once in a day. You pay no mind to it in today's world, and it's unfortunate. You're just so focused in your day-to-day activities and your daily tasks. So I find myself that starry night objects and other things can be passing by quite easily without being noticed, especially when you have a city that's just producing a pungent amount of light pollution that just blocks out the skies and just makes it hard to see anything out there. So if you dim the lights and you start to see those dark skies, you are sky worshiping and you have a civilization backed by a unifying idea from very powerful leadership. I think if you see something, you report it to the powers to be to get maybe compensation or reward of some kind, and the powers to be venture forth and claim their prize. It seems very plausible to me in my own humble but slightly biased opinion. So again, just to reaffirm what I'm saying there, people these days may not easily notice what is coming down at the sky. People back then that really took a strong standpoint on looking into the sky and were much more vigilant about it, probably saw these things and reported it due diligently. It makes sense to me. In closing, I will also note that while we are more and more populated in dense areas, I don't believe we are as subject to the ongoings of anything extraterrestrial as we may think we are. If meteorites are landing, then I wouldn't doubt it that they're just being taken away and hidden away for further examination and harvesting by powers to be, probably along with those crashed alien crafts as well. But I digress. That's just my own very biased opinion at this time. So let's circle back and get to King Tut here once more on the topic of his lineage, notably called mummies 317A and 317B, the two infant daughters of the pharaoh. Being his only children, this is another issue that is very, very serious for Egypt, as King Tut, as we said before, died very young and had not fathered an heir to the throne. But regarding the daughters, this was a very incestuous time for some families, and on that note, King Tut had married his sister-in-law, whom he shared these daughters with. This sort of incest wasn't only prominent here, but at other points higher up in the family lineage, proven through DNA acquired from mummified human remains. The point of this is to establish a plausible form of causation as to why King Tut's mummified daughters look alien. Please do Google them and see for yourself. It's very fascinating. Both are assumed to have been stillborn or died shortly after birth. And with incest, you have the inevitable exhaustion of genetic material in that lineage, which of course results in certain physical abnormalities. And every single scenario, indeed, and person is different, of course. But King Tut's children do very much bear a similar prominent appearance to that of modern-day gray aliens. Now, please note, I'm not insinuating this as I have no factual information to back up such a statement. All I can do is say what I see and wonder while I keep looking for more evidence. But what if, and I stretch that what if factor here, that King Tut's father was actually non-human? Akhenaten was his name. And there is some very interesting convoluted evidence here that he probably was not the father, because DNA points to another individual being the father. But for present sake, let's just go with this idea that he was. I found many alien theorists actually focusing on Akhenaten as a central figure for this topic. It's worth noting that depictions of Akhenaten all have been extremely exaggerated in how they depict his facial features and whatnot. He also was the one who dismantled old Egyptian religion by introducing the Aten worship, which, as we discussed, was the disk of the sun. This is again where the foundation comes from that says that, hey, this disc was actually a UFO and that he was really an extraterrestrial himself. I did try to see how the Anunnaki might tie into this, but as deities, they seem mostly prominent for Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. But you can never really dismiss the fact that certain beings are represented differently when spread across a vast amount of cultures and civilizations. But in the end, it's hard to say whether or not certain beings politically in this ancient world could have been alien of some kind. I know that it's a topic of discussion that Jesus was possibly in some regard or form, maybe had some kind of extraterrestrial component to him too, but that is a very, very convoluted topic, and I don't want to step on anyone's toes by diving too deep into that. But it's amazing how religion and extraterrestrial activity both seem to go hand in hand in some regards. It's really, really fascinating, and I really would not put it past the idea that something could be acting as some form of leadership or having a hand at play in the development of human civilizations, especially back in that time period when things were very much considered to be deitized and magic and just godly when you would descend from the heavens. That just fits that bill spot on. In closing, I'm just fascinated by all of this, and I'm thankful that my wife sent the request to me to catalog this information in kind of a condensed format just for future reference. While we can't confirm or deny these royal family members maybe ever being truly alien, we can certainly continue this pursuit to learn if they did harvest extraterrestrial metals and create tools and weapons ahead of their time. Hard to say if were they influenced, not necessarily in a form of leadership, but an actual manifested individual, but just, hey, here's a couple little things to speed you along technologically. Use some of this iron from these meteorites that we're going to drop off. I mean, who knows? See, there's so many things that you could just pitch because we just aren't around in that time anymore. We only have so much that we can really pull from to piece the puzzles back together. Now, we certainly can continue this pursuit, and just the fact that they were creating tools and weapons at the same time other civilizations like Sumerians were doing this as well with the same metals. It's just fascinating. I digress. Nearing this episode's end, I'm going to leave you with just another UFO encounter that took place with 3 former U.S. Army cavalrymen along the Israel-Egyptian border back in 2014. They reported 8 bright objects hovering and speeding across the sky in December of that year, and I quote, "I would describe it as a big object with several smaller objects, which appear to be communicating or scuffing, like a dogfight in the air. We knew it wasn't our military, and it was baffling. The objects were glowing. You could clearly see them with the naked eye, and it was clear how fast they were moving. To this day, I've never seen anything like the craft, covering such distance with extreme speeds." End quote. That is from one of the 3 men, Sergeant Travis Bingham, who at the time was stationed at the south end of the Israel-Egypt border. It's worth noting that this report came to light due to more recent discussions these past years in government on the UAP topic. I also did an episode a while back, I just mentioned here, on ancient pyramids. It's incredible how early they actually go. And I'm talking thousands upon thousands of years. And lastly, I was thinking the other day, and it kind of ties into just this thought of civilizations, and when you look at Egyptian culture and all these other amazing empires that were built and how they just so easily just collapsed. It really makes me think about our current civilization that we've grown into and we've built with the society, and how connected we are more than ever in this planet's history. It's scary because a lot of these empires, they go through famine, they go through supply shortages, they go economic downturns, and these are empires that have lasted for thousands, hundreds of years, very, very long time. And when you look at our current progress, most of these countries are 100 or so years old, and most of our current societies are just hundreds years old. We can go from, I guess, 500 and beyond. Like, we're still very, very new, I would dare say. And what'll happen when, or if things kind of go kaput? This civilization is left in the dust, and future civilizations are scrolling around the dust like, oh, this is oh, Canada, oh wow, this is a Canadian heritage site or something, or oh, look at this is an old fast food joint here, this is an old a skyscraper from over here. Like it's just interesting to think what is going to be left behind that future civilizations are going to look at, and how are things going to change, how are the gods going to change in this future civilization. Like they've changed so much before. It really just blows my mind to ponder and just reflect on. I do that a lot, but I digress. I keep digressing throughout this episode. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Cryptid Clues. Thank you to my wife for submitting the topic, and thank you to all of you listeners. If you have any thoughts on aliens and Egypt, please comment or email them in. I'd love to hear and read them. CryptidClues@gmail.com. We're also on social media, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. So until next time, everyone, take care and stay safe.